If you're planning to eat turkey this Thanksgiving, stop what you're doing and listen. I worked at the Sterling Progenitor Facility, the biggest turkey farm in the country. At least, that's what they say it is. But last week, I broke into a building that doesn't exist on any map and saw what they've been breeding down there. They're not turkeys, they're not animals. And Thanksgiving isn't about gratitude. It's not about family, or pilgrims, or history. It's a ritual. A psychic containment ritual. And if we don't perform it, if even 1 year slips by, the things they keep locked under Block D will wake up. And when they do, we won't be giving thanks. We'll be giving in. I just got a job at a massive turkey breeding facility. I thought it would be a standard farm gig, a steady paycheck for looking after livestock. But the hiring process was something else. I'm talking multiple interviews, background checks that went way too deep, and a non-disclosure agreement so thick I felt like I was signing on with the CIA. My supervisor, a grim-faced guy named Elias, said the rules were all about genetic purity and biosecurity. Sounded plausible, big money agriculture and all that. But last night, I broke protocol. I saw what they keep locked away in the oldest part of the facility, a section that isn't on any of the blueprints. And I can tell you right now, these are not your normal Thanksgiving turkeys. And gratitude is the last thing on their minds. The place is called the Sterling Progenitor Facility, and it's out in the middle of nowhere, miles from anything. From a distance, it looks like any other industrial farm. Long metal buildings, huge silos, and the constant hum of ventilation. But the closer you get, the more you see the cracks in that facade. The fence is 12 feet high, for one, and the razor wire at the top is angled in, not out. I remember thinking, what are they trying to keep in? There are motion sensors, cameras, and guard towers, staffed by guys who do not look like your average security guards. They've got the hard, watchful eyes of prison staff. My job was in Sector Gamma, the incubation wing. It was a sterile world of white hallways that smelled constantly of ammonia and disinfectant. My days were just a loop of procedures. Monitor the incubators. Check the automated feeders for thousands of newly hatched birds. It was clinical, detached. The turkeys were just units of production, cogs in a giant efficient machine. See, in these commercial facilities, everything is controlled. Hens and toms are kept separate, and it's all artificial insemination. It's a sterile, mechanical process that's as far from nature as you can get. I got used to the coldness of it all. It's just a job, I told myself. What I couldn't get used to was the security. Every door needed a key card. Every sector had a checkpoint. They even weighed us on industrial scales on our way in and out. Elias said it was to prevent product theft, but it felt more like they were making sure we weren't carrying something else, something they couldn't see. I tried asking my co-workers about it, real casual. Most of them were lifers who'd been there for decades, and they had this empty, practiced way of shutting you down. It's all about protecting the investment, one guy told me, his eyes never meeting mine. These birds are 100 years of genetic refinement. Can't risk contamination. But it never added up. Contamination from what? Animal rights activists? The security was way overkill for that. It felt foundational. Like the whole point of this place wasn't to perfect a product, but to contain a problem. And the strangest part of it all was Hatchery Block D. It was the oldest building on the property, a squat, concrete bunker that was visibly falling apart. While the rest of the facility gleamed, Block D was dark, stained, and dead silent. It was completely off-limits to everyone except senior staff and a special team they called containment specialists. These guys weren't farmhands. They wore different gear and never spoke to us. They moved with a purpose that was way too serious for just managing turkeys. Block D was a black hole on the facility map, and my curiosity started to feel more like an obsession. Why was a derelict old building the most heavily guarded place here? The first time I saw one act weird, I tried to explain it away. I was in a grow-out pen, fixing a feeder line. It was just a sea of thousands of young toms, white feathers and pink heads. They usually moved together, like a single jumpy organism. But one of them, near the back wall, was just still. It wasn't eating. It wasn't moving. It was just watching me. I stopped what I was doing, a chill running down my spine. Its head was tilted at an angle that just wasn't right, and its eyes, usually so dull and vacant, seemed sharp. They weren't just looking, they were tracking me. As I moved, its head pivoted, following me with a smoothness that wasn't animal. Then it made a sound, not a gobble or a cluck. It was this low, guttural clicking, a wet, rhythmic sound that sounded sickeningly like a garbled imitation of speech. For one horrible second, it sounded like it was trying to say my name. I just shook my head, heart pounding. I was tired, working too many doubles, but I couldn't shake the image of its intelligent, hateful stare. After that, I started noticing things. Senior staff having hushed conversations that would cut off the second I walked by. I'd catch fragments, words that made no sense, resonant frequency, psychic, bleed, containment failure. One time, I saw a maintenance guy frantically scrubbing these weird geometric symbols off a wall near Block D. They looked less like graffiti and more like something ancient. The thing that pushed me over the edge happened on a Tuesday night. A supervisor called in sick, and Elias, looking like he really didn't want to, assigned me a cleanup route that bordered the restricted zone around Block D. "Just do your sweep and get out," he said, his jaw tight. "Don't linger. And don't look at anything you're not supposed to." The air near Block D felt different. It was cold, and there was this low hum that was almost too low to hear, but you could feel it in your teeth. The lights flickered. As I was emptying a trash bin, I glanced at the main door to the old hatchery. It was a solid slab of steel, something you'd see on a missile silo. And for just a split second, from the gap underneath, I saw a faint, pulsing violet-green light. It came with a sound, a high-pitched, chittering shriek that was instantly cut off. It was a sound of pure agony. And it was definitely not a turkey. That's when I knew whatever they were keeping in Block D wasn't just another breed. It was something else entirely. I didn't sleep that night. The violet light and that shriek just played on a loop in my head. Elias's warning, the strange symbols, the turkey's stare, all these pieces were floating around, and Block D was at the centre of it all. I knew I couldn't ask any more questions. If I wanted answers, I'd have to take them. My obsession became a second job. I started mapping security patrols, timing their rotations. I studied the facility's computer network, which I had limited access to for my daily reports. The network was ancient, a patchwork of decades-old systems layered with newer ones, full of legacy ports and forgotten backdoors. Nobody ever fully rebuilt it because shutting it down risked destabilizing Block D's monitoring systems. That made it possible for me to slip in. I found a loophole, an old maintenance port in the network that hadn't been properly shut down. It was a long shot, but it was my only way in. For 2 weeks, I spent my nights huddled in a forgotten supply closet with a modified tablet, running decryption programs. Finally, one night, something clicked. I was in. A hidden directory named TGI Archive, Inside, it was chaos, but one folder stood out. Project Corvus. My blood ran cold. I tapped it open. It was a library of internal memos, incident reports, and research papers going all the way back to the early 20th century. I started with a file named Corvus Orientation 7A. My hands were shaking as I read. The document was a clinical, terrifying confession. The creatures we were raising were codenamed Coracii. The file stated their origin as non-terrestrial, alien. They weren't animals. They were an alien species that had been dormant deep under the continent for God knows how long. The Sterling facility wasn't a farm. It was a prison, a containment and culling site. The early reports were the worst. According to the files, the Coracii are telepathic. They have a low-level hive mind that projects emotions, mostly fear and aggression. At close range, a mature one could cause crippling paranoia, hallucinations, and eventually, a brain hemorrhage. They tried to kill them at first. Of course they did. The oldest files talked about full incineration protocols, experimental acids, controlled demolitions. None of it worked the way they wanted. A dead Coracii didn't stay dead in any way that mattered. Its tissue behaved like a psychic spore, turning every scrap of it into a new node in the hive mind. One heavily redacted file described what happened when they managed to completely destroy a prime. For 12 minutes, every sensor in the facility maxed out. People hundreds of miles away reported mass hallucinations, shared nightmares, waves of violence and self-harm. The conclusion from the Terrene Governance Initiative was brutally simple. Do not kill the progenitors. Contain, sedate, isolate. Alive, they could be monitored and suppressed. Dead, they infected reality itself. I found an incident report from 1987 about a breach in Block D. A containment specialist, a 15-year veteran, was cornered by what they called a prime progenitor. The report was mostly blacked out, but it described the aftermath. The man was found alive, but in a vegetative state, his brain scans showing activity consistent with a permanent waking nightmare. The turkeys we raised for Thanksgiving, they're a genetically engineered subspecies, a lobotomized, neurologically crippled version of the real Coracii. Their psychic abilities were bred out, their intelligence reduced to basic animal instinct. The document called them dampeners, or buffer stock. They were a biological tool. The entire purpose of this facility is to manage the prime Coracii in Block D, while mass-producing the dampener stock for what the file chillingly called the annual harvest, Thanksgiving. I felt sick. I had to get up and pace the tiny closet, my mind just reeling. Alien turkeys, psychic attacks. It sounds like a cheap sci-fi novel. But the documents were so detailed, so bureaucratic in how they catalogued the horror. It was the cold, procedural language that made it all feel so real. Then I found the next file. Historical and anthropological analysis, the Plymouth misconception. And that's when the last, soul-crushing piece of the puzzle clicked into place. The document mixed real history with its own terrifying story. It pointed out that our popular, sanitized version of the first Thanksgiving is mostly a 19th century invention, a story cooked up to create a sense of national harmony. It talked about the reality of the 1621 gathering, a tense meeting between the English colonists and the Wampanoag tribe. It correctly stated that the Wampanoag had been devastated by plagues just before the Pilgrims arrived, losing up to 90% of their people from European diseases. But then, it presented a horrifying alternate theory. It claimed that the dormant, true Coracii, sleeping deep in the earth under what's now Massachusetts, were disturbed by the colonists. Their arrival started to wake the hive mind. The document proposed that this awakening produced a psychic frequency that didn't cause the plagues, but amplified them, turning a terrible epidemic into an apocalypse. According to this secret history, the 1621 harvest feast was an accident born of desperation. The starving colonists and the shattered Wampanoag gathered in an uneasy truce. They ate local game, including wild turkeys, a species related to the dormant Coracii. And something unexpected happened. The document theorized that the mass consumption of this related genetic material had a dampening effect on the hive mind's psychic field. It was like a biological jamming signal. It soothed the rising psychic pressure. The first Thanksgiving wasn't a celebration. It was the discovery of a weapon, a ritual. This secret, the document claimed, was discovered, suppressed, and eventually institutionalized by a shadowy global group called the Terrene Governance Initiative, TGI, the people I work for. They captured the true Coracii, imprisoned them here, and engineered the dampener turkeys we eat today. They perfected the ritual, influencing leaders and governments for centuries. Lincoln making it a national holiday in 1863. Congress cemented the date in 1941. It was all part of the plan to ensure the ritual was performed at the right moment, in the right place. They created a turkey subspecies designed to be docile, grow fast, and when eaten by millions of people on the same day, generate a psychic wave powerful enough to keep the ancient gods in their prison for another year. The dampener stock only worked because the originals were still here. Their genetic code had to be maintained, studied, copied. The lock and the key were made of the same thing. If the last prime Coracii ever died, the ritual would fail. The prison would crack open, and there'd be nothing left for Thanksgiving to hold back. Thanksgiving isn't about gratitude, it isn't global. Just the only ritual large enough. According to the files, the synchronized act of millions of Americans eating dampener turkey at the exact same time releases a psychic shockwave strong enough to blanket the entire region of North America, where the Coracii hive mind reaches through the earth. It doesn't matter that the whole world isn't participating. It only matters that the critical mass happens all at once. Thanksgiving isn't a celebration. It's the one day a year when enough people participate in the ritual to keep the prison door shut. I'm uploading these files as I'm recording this. I don't know how long I have. What I'm about to tell you is what I did next. It's why they're hunting me. If you believe any of this, if you feel that cold dread in your gut that tells you this is real, you need to share this. I don't know if I'll get another chance to get this out. I couldn't just run. Who would believe me? I'd just be another crazy guy on the internet. I needed proof. I had to see a prime with my own eyes. I needed a picture, something nobody could deny. I had to get into Block D. The plan was insane, basically suicide. The facility was in its annual pre-harvest lockdown, the week before the massive shipments go out. Security was tighter than ever. It was the worst possible time to try and get in. It was also my only chance. During a shift change, there was a 7-minute window where the main corridor to Block D was unwatched. I stole a senior staff keycard and a small disposable camera. My heart was trying to beat its way out of my chest. I swiped the card. Green light. I slipped through the first door. The temperature immediately dropped. That low hum I felt outside was a physical presence here. A vibration that went straight through my bones and made me feel sick. The corridor was dark, lit only by emergency strobes that pulsed every 10 seconds. The walls were stained concrete, carved with those same geometric patterns, and they were glowing with that same faint violet-green light. The light was coming from inside the symbols. The dampener cycle was at its weakest this week, making the patterns flare brighter. I moved toward the main chamber door. It was a massive circular vault, like on a submarine. and it was slightly ajar. The last guard rotation had been performing a feeding cycle when the psychic disruption alarms triggered mid-cycle. The sudden flare forced them to retreat before sealing the door. During a psychic surge, manual closing becomes nearly impossible. That's why it was open. That's why I got in. I squeezed through the gap, and the humming became a wave of psychic pressure that made me want to scream. The chamber was immense. It was a cavernous, dark space that smelled of ozone, rot, and something metallic and alien. This wasn't a hatchery. It was a prison. Lining the walls were dozens of reinforced enclosures made of some thick, shimmering glass. And inside them were the Coracii. Calling them turkeys is a joke. It's like calling a great white shark a goldfish. They were vaguely bird-like, I guess, but that's where it ended. They stood nearly 6 feet tall, on legs with too many joints, ending in talons that scraped the floor. Their feathers weren't feathers. They were an oily, iridescent black that shifted from purple to green to a deep, bloody red. But their heads... God, their heads were the worst part. Featherless and pale with no beak. Instead, there was a complex, vertical slit that pulsed and quivered, lined with what looked like tiny, sharp teeth. And their eyes. They had no pupils. Just 2 solid orbs of glowing internal light, the colour of a dying star. Most were dormant, but one, right in front of me, was awake. It turned its head, the motion unnervingly smooth, and its glowing eyes locked onto mine. The moment it saw me, my world dissolved. It wasn't a sound. It was a psychic sledgehammer. A wave of pure, concentrated hate slammed into my mind. I was pinned to the wall, paralysed. Images that weren't mine flooded my head. I saw dying galaxies, planets of black glass cracking under a swollen sun. I saw entire civilizations of light and energy devoured by a shrieking, feathered darkness. I felt its age, eons, not years, and its hunger, a cosmic void that wanted to consume all warmth, all life, all thought. I felt its bottomless hatred for me, for my species, for the cage we built around it. The Coracii's psychic lunge triggered the chamber's internal failsafe, an automated anti-resonance pulse that activates when a prime exceeds its mental boundaries. The facility-wide alarm hit at the same moment, breaking the psychic connection just long enough for me to move. That's the only reason I'm not dead. And in that moment of agony, I understood. The dampener turkeys weren't just a jamming signal, their genetic code was a key. Eating them reinforces the lock. The act of millions of us, all focused on this one single act of eating on one single day, strengthens the prison. The collective, mundane thought of Thanksgiving dinner creates a psychic barrier of boring, everyday reality that these cosmic horrors can't break. Gratitude is the lie we tell ourselves to make the ritual easier to swallow. The real fuel for the cage isn't our thankfulness. It's our blissful ignorance. An alarm blared, shattering the psychic attack. They knew I was there. The Coracii shrieked, a sound that exploded in my skull, and I scrambled backward, fumbling for the camera, snapping one blurry picture before I turned and ran. Behind me, I heard screeching metal, shattering glass, and the triumphant, terrifying cries of things that were finally breaking free. I don't know how I got out. I just ran. I'm recording this from a cheap motel 3 states away. My face is on every security alert. I'm a fugitive. The Terrene Governance Initiative is real, and they're hunting me. They'll say I'm a disgruntled employee, a terrorist, a madman. They will do anything to keep this secret. This Thanksgiving, when you see that turkey on your table, you need to understand what you're really looking at. You're looking at a key. you're looking at a piece of a cage. The holiday isn't a celebration. It's an act of containment. And we are the unknowing prison guards, turning the lock year after year. Share this. Please, get the word out before they find me. You need to know the truth. Hi everyone. Thanks for listening. Every turkey I've ever tried to cook has come out either raw, burnt, or actively trying to fight back. So honestly, this story just explains a lot. A massive shout out to my members. Or rather, member Mark Mathern 7322. If you enjoyed the chaos, hit subscribe, like, and maybe join the membership so you can say, I was here before she got weirdly famous. If you really, really enjoyed it, think I have that super thanks button down there somewhere. Even £1 helps me toward my goal of making this a full-time thing. Then I can just have one full-time thing instead of my day job and this full-time. I'm here a lot. Good night.